Have you ever felt like you hit rock bottom on the one night of the year when everyone else is celebrating? Picture this. It's Christmas Eve. You're a single dad. You've just spent your last $100 on a blind date, and the woman across the table doesn't just reject you. She humiliates you. She tells you you're too boring and leaves you with the check. You think it's over. You think you're going home to a cold apartment and a broken heart. But then, 20 minutes later, a black limousine pulls up beside you in the snow. The window rolls down, and the same woman who just crushed your soul looks you in the eye and asks the one question you never saw coming. Will you be my husband? This is the story of Ethan Caldwell, and trust me, you are not ready for the twist. The radiator in Ethan Caldwell's tiny apartment in Chicago's Rogers Park rattled like a dying engine, a constant reminder that he needed to call the landlord again. But he wouldn't. Not tonight. Tonight, he had to pretend he was someone else. Someone who didn't count pennies at the grocery store. Someone who had a future, not just a past he was trying to outrun. Ethan adjusted his tie in the cracked bathroom mirror. It was a dark blue silk tie, a relic from his days at the architecture firm before the layoffs, before his wife, Meredith, had walked out 3 years ago, leaving him with a mountain of debt and a 2-year-old daughter, Lily. "Daddy, you look like a prince." Ethan turned to see Lily standing in the doorway, clutching her worn-out stuffed rabbit, Mr. Hops. She was wearing her flannel pajamas, her blonde hair messy from sleep. He knelt down, his knees cracking slightly. "And you, my lady, are supposed to be asleep. Mrs. Higgins will be here any minute." "Is the new mummy coming home with you?" Lily asked, her eyes wide and hopeful. The question felt like a punch to the gut. "It's just a dinner, Lil. Just a friend of a friend." He didn't have the heart to tell her that this friend of a friend was a blind date set up by his old college roommate, Mark. Mark had sworn that this woman, Sarah Sterling, was different. She's a career woman, Ethan. Intense, sure, but she's looking for something real. "Just be yourself." Ethan kissed Lily's forehead, tucked her back into bed, and waited for Mrs. Higgins, the elderly neighbor who babysat for a fraction of the usual rate. When he finally stepped out into the biting Chicago wind, checking his watch, he felt a familiar dread. He had exactly $300 in his checking account. Dinner at Le Monarque, the French bistro Sarah had chosen, would easily cost half of that. He arrived 10 minutes early, brushing snow off his coat. The restaurant was warm, smelling of roasted duck and expensive perfume. He was led to a corner table where Sarah Sterling was already seated. She was stunning. That was the first thing Ethan noticed. She had dark, sharp hair cut in a bob that accentuated her jawline, and she wore a red dress that looked like it cost more than Ethan's car. But she wasn't looking at the menu. She was typing furiously on her phone, her brow furrowed. "Sarah?" Ethan asked tentatively. She didn't look up. 1 second. "The merger is stalling in Tokyo. Incompetent fools." She tapped the screen one last time, set the phone face down, and finally looked at him. Her eyes were ice blue, intelligent, and completely devoid of warmth. "Ethan, you're the architect." "I was. I'm doing freelance drafting now," Ethan said, trying to smile. "It's nice to meet you, Sarah. Mark spoke highly of you." "Mark talks too much, Sarge," she said, picking up her wineglass. She hadn't waited for him to order. "Let's cut to the chase, Ethan. I'm not here for romance. My grandmother insisted I go on this date because she thinks I work too hard. I'm doing this to get her off my back for Christmas." Ethan blinked. The honesty was refreshing, but brutal. "Oh, well, I appreciate the candor. I'm sort of in the same boat. Mark thought I needed to get out more." "You have a child," she stated. It wasn't a question. "Yes, Lily. She's 5. "Baggage," Sarah murmured, almost to herself. Ethan stiffened. "She's not baggage. She's my daughter." Sarah waved a hand dismissively. "I didn't mean it emotionally. I meant logistically. Children require time, energy, and money. I have very little of the first two, and no interest in spending the third on a family." The waiter arrived. Ethan ordered the cheapest thing on the menu, the roasted chicken. Sarah ordered the lobster thermidor and a bottle of vintage Pinot Noir without asking him. The dinner was a disaster. Ethan tried to make conversation about art, about the city's skyline, about the holidays. Sarah shut him down at every turn. She checked her phone 5 times. She critiqued his suit, a bit 2018, isn't it? And asked him why he hadn't started his own firm yet. "I prioritize stability for my daughter," Ethan explained, his patience wearing thin. "Risk isn't a luxury I can afford right now." Sarah sighed, placing her napkin on the table. She looked at him with a mixture of pity and boredom. "You're a nice guy, Ethan. You really are. You're safe. You're dependable. You're a Honda Civic." Ethan stared at her. "Excuse me?" "I'm a Ferrari," she said simply. "I need someone who can keep up. Someone with hunger. You've settled. And that's fine for some women. But not for me." She signaled the waiter for the check. When it arrived, she didn't even reach for her purse. She just looked at Ethan. The bill was $280. Ethan felt the blood drain from his face. He pulled out his debit card, his hand shaking slightly. He paid it. He tipped. He didn't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing this meal would mean he'd be eating instant noodles for the next 2 weeks. "Thank you for dinner," Sarah said, standing up and putting on her coat. "Merry Christmas, Ethan. I hope you find someone nice." She walked out into the snow without looking back. Ethan sat there for 5 minutes, staring at the empty table. He felt small. He felt foolish. He felt like the Honda Civic she accused him of being. He left the restaurant and began the long walk to the train station. The snow was falling harder now, covering the city in a white blanket. The Christmas lights on Michigan Avenue blurred through his damp eyes. He was 32 years old, and he felt like his life was over. He was 2 blocks from the station when a sleek black town car screeched to a halt beside him, splashing slush onto his trousers. Ethan stopped, annoyed. "Hey, watch it!" The rear window rolled down. Sarah Sterling was sitting there, but the boredom was gone from her face. She looked pale, her eyes wide with something that looked suspiciously like panic. "Get in!" she commanded. "What? No!" Ethan said, clutching his coat tighter. "I'm going home to my daughter. You made your point, Sarah. I'm a Civic. You're a Ferrari. Drive away." "Ethan, get in the damn car!" she yelled, her voice cracking. "I will pay you. I will pay you for your time. Just get in." Ethan hesitated. He needed money. God, he needed money. He opened the door and slid onto the leather seat. The car was warm. Sarah was gripping her phone so hard her knuckles were white. "What is going on?" Ethan asked. Sarah took a deep breath. She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time that night. She seemed to be calculating something. "My grandfather just died," she said. "I'm sorry," Ethan said, his anger softening. "That's terrible. Is that why you came back?" "No," Sarah said. "He died 20 minutes ago. My cousin Conrad just called me. And that means the trust fund activates at midnight on December 25th. Okay? The trust fund controls the controlling interest in Sterling Media, my company. The company I built from the ground up, while my father was busy bankrupting us." Sarah's voice was shaking. "But my grandfather was old-fashioned. He put a clause in the will, a stability clause." She turned to Ethan, her eyes blazing. "To inherit the shares, I have to be married. By midnight, on Christmas Day." Ethan looked at his watch. It was 9:30 p.m. on Christmas Eve. "That's in 26 hours. "Yes," Sarah said. "Conrad knows I'm single. He's already celebrating. He thinks he's going to strip the company for parts and sell it to a venture capital firm. I cannot let that happen. I need a husband. Now." Ethan laughed nervously. "So what? You're going to hire an actor?" "Actors are liabilities. They talk to the press. They blackmail you," Sarah said. She leaned closer. "I need someone safe. Someone dependable. Someone who needs money and cares about reputation. Someone who won't try to take over my company. She paused. I need a Honda Civic. Ethan stared at her. You want me to marry you? Technically, yes. Legally, yes. Emotionally? No, Sarah said quickly. It's a business arrangement. 1 year. We stay married for 1 year to satisfy the clause. You live in my penthouse. We make public appearances. Then we divorce, quietly. You're insane, Ethan reached for the door handle. I'll pay you $500,000, Sarah blurted out. Ethan froze. His hand hovered over the handle. $500,000. That was Lily's college tuition. That was a house. That was freedom. And, Sarah added, seeing him hesitate, I'll pay off your debts. All of them. Mark told me about the medical bills from your late wife. I know you're drowning, Ethan. Ethan turned back to her. The cruelty of her earlier rejection was still there, stinging his pride, but the desperation in her eyes was real. And the money could save Lily's future. What about Lily? He asked quietly. She moves in with us. I have plenty of room. I won't play mother, but I'll ensure she has the best nannies, the best schools. She won't want for anything. Ethan looked out the window at the falling snow. He thought of the drafty apartment. He thought of Lily asking for a new mummy. This wasn't a fairy tale. This was a business deal with the devil in a red dress. 1 year, Ethan said. 1 year, Sarah confirmed. Ethan took a breath that rattled in his chest. Okay, I'll do it. The next 24 hours were a blur of lawyers, caffeine, and terrifying efficiency. Ethan had expected a quick trip to City Hall, but Sarah Sterling didn't do anything halfway. They went to her family's estate lawyer in the middle of the night, a man named Mr. Finch, who looked like he hadn't slept since the Reagan administration. He drafted a prenuptial agreement thicker than a phone book. Clause 4, Section B, Finch mumbled, tapping the paper. Mr. Caldwell waives all rights to Sterling media assets. In exchange, a deposit of $250,000 is made immediately into a trust for Lily Caldwell, with the remainder paid upon dissolution of the marriage. Ethan signed. He felt like he was signing away his soul, but then he checked his banking app. The balance had gone from $20 to $250,020. He nearly dropped the phone. We need to get to the courthouse the second it opens, Sarah said, pacing the office. She had changed into a white pantsuit that looked bridal yet severe. Then we have to go to the family Christmas gala tomorrow night. That's where they're reading the will. Wait, Ethan said, rubbing his eyes. We have to announce this in front of your whole family. Tomorrow. It's the only way to stop Conrad, Sarah said. He's bringing the board members. If I walk in there single, he wins. If I walk in with a husband, I win. The wedding itself was unromantic and swift. A drowsy judge at the Cook County Clerk's office married them at 9 a.m. on Christmas morning. There were no rings. Sarah pulled a platinum band out of her purse that she said was her father's. It fit Ethan perfectly, which felt oddly ominous. You may kiss the bride, the judge mumbled, looking at the clock. Ethan turned to Sarah. She looked stiff, her eyes fixed on a point over his shoulder. He leaned in, intending to just peck her cheek, but she grabbed his lapels and pulled him close. Her lips were soft, tasting of mint and terror. It lasted 3 seconds, but it sent a jolt of electricity through Ethan that he hadn't felt in years. When she pulled away, her cheeks were flushed. Good, she said, smoothing her suit. That looked convincing. Let's go. They spent the rest of Christmas Day moving Ethan and Lily into Sarah's penthouse. It was a glass fortress overlooking Lake Michigan. It was spotless, white, and completely dangerous for a 5-year-old. Don't touch the vase, Lily, Ethan said for the 10th time as Lily ran around the living room with Mr. Hops. It's okay, Sarah said, walking in. She looked exhausted. It's insured. Just keep her out of my office. Please. She handed Ethan a garment bag. Put this on. The gala starts in 2 hours. And Ethan? Yeah. Conrad is going to be vicious. He's going to dig into your past. He's going to try to humiliate you to get to me. Do not let him." Ethan looked at the tuxedo in the bag. He straightened his spine. He wasn't doing this for Sarah. He was doing this for Lily. "I can handle a bully, Sarah. I survived high school and foreclosure. I think I can handle a rich kid in a tuxedo." Sarah looked at him, a flicker of respect in her eyes. "I hope so, because Conrad isn't just a bully. He's a shark." The Sterling Christmas Gala was held at the Drake Hotel. It was an ocean of diamonds, velvet, and fake smiles. When Ethan and Sarah walked in, the room went silent. Sarah had her arm linked through his, her grip like iron. "Head up," she whispered. "Smile like you know a secret they don't." They moved through the crowd. Ethan felt hundreds of eyes judging him, assessing his suit, his haircut, his worth. "Sarah!" A booming voice cut through the murmur. A man stepped forward. He was tall, blonde, and handsome in a way that made you want to punch him. He held a glass of scotch and wore a smirk that could curdle milk. This was Conrad. "I heard about grandfather," Conrad said, his voice dripping with faux sympathy. He didn't look at Sarah. He looked straight at Ethan. "And who is this? The waiter?" "This is my husband," Sarah said, her voice loud and clear. Gasps rippled through the room. A glass shattered somewhere in the back. Conrad's smirk faltered for a fraction of a second, then returned, sharper than before. "Oh, husband? Really, Sarah? You think grandfather's lawyers are idiots? You picked up a stray off the street to secure the shares." "We've been seeing each other for 6 months," Ethan lied smoothly, stepping forward. He extended a hand. "Ethan Caldwell, architect. Charming to meet you, Conrad. Sarah has told me so little about you." The insult landed. Conrad's eyes narrowed. He ignored Ethan's hand. "Caldwell," Conrad said, pulling out his phone. "Let me see Caldwell. Ah, here we are. Ethan Caldwell. Filed for bankruptcy protection 2 years ago. Wife died of, tragic. Left you with nothing. So you're not just a stray. You're a gold digger." The room was deadly silent. Sarah went rigid beside him. Ethan didn't flinch. He thought of Lily, safe in that penthouse. He thought of the medical bills he had paid off that morning. He stepped into Conrad's personal space. "My finances are none of your business," Ethan said, his voice low and dangerous. "But since you brought up family, Sarah told me how you missed your grandfather's funeral preparations to meet with investors to sell the company. I may have lost money, Conrad, but at least I didn't lose my dignity." Conrad's face turned bright red. He opened his mouth to retort, but an older man in a suit, the executor of the will, stepped onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen," the executor announced, "if I could have your attention, it is time to read the codicil regarding the ownership of Sterling Media." Sarah squeezed Ethan's arm. "You did good," she whispered, "but this isn't over." The executor read the terms. Sarah Sterling, having provided proof of marriage, was named majority shareholder. Conrad threw his glass into the fireplace. The crash echoed through the hall. He walked up to Sarah and Ethan, his eyes manic. "Enjoy the victory lap, cousin," Conrad hissed. "But marriage requires cohabitation. It requires proof of a legitimate relationship. I'm going to be watching you. I'm going to hire people to watch you. If you slip up once, if I find out this is a sham, I'll have you both in prison for fraud." He turned to Ethan. "And you. Watch your back. Accidents happen to architects on construction sites all the time." Conrad stormed out. Ethan let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. He looked at Sarah. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the crowd, her mask of perfection back in place. But her hand was trembling in his. "Welcome to the family, Ethan," she whispered. The first morning in the Sterling penthouse felt less like waking up in a home and more like waking up in a museum exhibit. Ethan opened his eyes to a ceiling so white it hurt. The bed was enormous, the sheets made of a thread count that probably exceeded his credit score. He sat up, the events of the last 48 hours crashing down on him. Married. He was married to Sarah Sterling, the Ice Queen of Chicago. He threw his legs over the side of the bed and checked the baby monitor on the nightstand. Lily was still asleep in the room down the hall, a room Sarah had hastily furnished with a canopy bed that looked like it belonged in a Victorian dollhouse. Ethan padded out into the hallway, his bare feet sinking into the plush carpet. The penthouse was silent. It was a sprawling expanse of glass, steel, and modern art that looked like it would shatter if you sneezed too hard. He found the kitchen. It was a stainless steel laboratory. He opened the refrigerator and found it stocked with sparkling water, kale, and unidentifiable organic pastes. No milk, no eggs, no juice. Great, Ethan muttered. We're billionaires, and we're going to starve. He found a canister of coffee beans and a machine that looked like it could launch a shuttle to Mars. After 10 minutes of wrestling with it, he managed to brew a pot. He was just pouring a cup when he heard the click of heels on marble. Sarah marched into the kitchen. She was already dressed for battle in a sharp charcoal suit, an iPad tucked under her arm, a Bluetooth earpiece already blinking in her ear. "Sell the futures," she was saying. "I don't care what the projections say. Dump it." She tapped the earpiece off and looked at Ethan. She blinked, as if surprised to find a man in her kitchen. "Good morning," she said stiffly. "Morning," Ethan saluted with his mug. "Coffee?" It took a degree in engineering to figure out the machine, but I think I managed. "I don't drink coffee. Green tea only," she said, walking past him to the fridge. She frowned at the contents. Did the chef not come?" "I haven't seen a chef. Just me and the kale." Sarah sighed, a sound of profound irritation. "I fired Henri last week. I forgot to hire a replacement. I'll have my assistant send up breakfast." "I can cook," Ethan offered. "If we had groceries. I make a mean pancake." Sarah looked at him like he had offered to perform open-heart surgery with a spoon. "We don't do pancakes. They're carb-heavy and sluggish. We need fuel." Before Ethan could argue the merits of fluffy carbohydrates, a small voice echoed from the hallway. "Daddy? I can't find Mr. Hops." Lily stood at the entrance of the kitchen, looking small and terrified in the vast space. She was clutching the hem of her pajama top. Sarah froze. She looked at Lily, then at Ethan, panic flaring in her eyes. She clearly had no idea how to interact with a human under the height of 5 feet. Ethan went to Lily immediately, scooping her up. "Hey, Bug, did you check under the big bed?" "Yes, he's gone. The monster took him," Lily sniffled, burying her face in Ethan's neck. "There are no monsters here, Lil," Ethan soothed her. He looked at Sarah. "I need to go find him. He's probably packed in one of the boxes." "I have a meeting in 20 minutes, Sarah said, checking her watch. "Sarah," Ethan said, his voice firm. "She's scared. It's a new place. We need to find the rabbit." Sarah hesitated. She looked at the crying child. Something twitched in her expression, a crack in the armor. "What does he look like?" Sarah asked. "He's a rabbit. Beige. Missing an ear," Lily mumbled into Ethan's shoulder. Sarah set her iPad down on the counter. "Okay, you check the bedroom. I'll check the living area." For the next 10 minutes, the CEO of Sterling Media was on her hands and knees, crawling under Italian leather sofas and peering behind $50,000 sculptures. Ethan suppressed a smile as he watched her. "Aha!" Sarah's voice came from behind a potted fern. She stood up, dusting off her knees. She held Mr. Hops by his remaining ear. She looked at the toy with mild disgust. It was old, loved, and slightly sticky. But she carried it over to Lily. "Is this the fugitive?" Sarah asked. Lily gasped. She wriggled out of Ethan's arms and ran to Sarah, snatching the rabbit. "Mr. Hops!" Then she did something that made Ethan's breath catch. She wrapped her arms around Sarah's legs and hugged her. Sarah went rigid. Her arms hovered in the air, unsure where to land. She looked at Ethan with wide, terrified eyes, mouthing, "Help me." "Thank you, Sarah," Lily beamed, looking up. Sarah slowly, awkwardly, patted the top of Lily's head twice. "You are adequate. Welcome. You are welcome." She pulled away gently and smoothed her suit. "I have to go. The driver is downstairs. I'll see you. Tonight." She grabbed her iPad and fled the apartment as if it were on fire. The first month was a strange dance of avoidance and performance. Sarah worked 18-hour days. Ethan spent his time setting up Lily in a private kindergarten, paid for by the Sterling Trust, and trying to make the penthouse feel like something other than a hotel lobby. But the outside world wouldn't let them hide. 3 weeks in, Sarah's publicist, a woman named Janice, who terrified Ethan more than Sarah did, sat them down. "The rumors are starting," Janice said, slapping a tabloid on the coffee table. The headline read, "The $1 billion sham. Sterling heiress marries mystery man." "Conrad is feeding them stories," Sarah said, pacing the room. "He's telling people Ethan is a paid actor." "We need a counter-narrative," Janice said. "We need a spread. Vanity Fair or Vogue. A look inside the fairy tale romance." "No," Ethan said instantly. "No cameras in the house. Not with Lily." Sarah stopped pacing. She looked at Ethan. He expected her to argue, to tell him he was an employee, and he would do as he was told. "He's right," Sarah said. "No cameras near the child. But we can do a couple's interview. Somewhere neutral. And we need to be seen out. Dinner dates. Holding hands. The works." Janice nodded. "Fine. But you two look like you've never touched each other. You have zero chemistry. Fix it." And so the dating began. Friday night, they were at Alinea, one of the most expensive restaurants in the world. The paparazzi were tipped off and waiting outside. Inside, at a secluded table, the air was thick with tension. "Hold my hand," Sarah whispered. Ethan reached across the table and took her hand. Her skin was cool. Her fingers were slender and strong. "You're tense," he noted. "I hate this," she muttered, smiling for a camera phone flashing across the room. "I hate pretending." "Then don't pretend," Ethan said. He rubbed his thumb over her knuckles. "Tell me something real. Tell me about the first building you ever fell in love with." Sarah blinked. The question caught her off guard. "What? You're in real estate, but you have an architect's eye. I saw the blueprints on your desk for the Spire project. You made notes on the structural integrity, not just the square footage. So tell me, what building made you care?" Sarah looked down at their joined hands. The mask slipped just an inch. "The Flatiron Building in New York," she said softly. "I was 7. My father took me on a business trip. He ignored me the whole time, but I remember standing on the corner, looking up at that strange, sharp wedge cutting through the sky. It looked like it was defying the city, like it didn't belong, but it forced the streets to bend around it." "It's a masterpiece," Ethan agreed. "Daniel Burnham, Chicago architect, actually." "I know," Sarah said. She looked up at him, and her eyes weren't cold anymore. They were curious. "And you? Why architecture?" "I like the idea that you can build shelter," Ethan said. "That you can take empty space and turn it into safety. When I was a kid, we moved around a lot. Evictions, mostly. I used to draw houses I would never lose." Sarah went silent. She squeezed his hand, and this time it wasn't for the cameras. "I'm sorry," she said, "about what I said at the first dinner. About you being a Honda Civic." Ethan laughed. "It's okay. Civics are reliable. They run forever." "You're not boring, Ethan," she said, her voice dropping an octave. "You're grounded. I've never had grounded before." For a moment, the restaurant noise faded. They were just two people, tired and lonely, finding a strange comfort in the middle of a lie. Then a flashbulb popped right against the window glass, blinding them. Sarah snatched her hand back, the mask slamming back into place. "We should go," she said coldly. "We have the shot." By February, the Chicago winter was brutal, but the atmosphere in the penthouse had thawed slightly. Lily had started calling Sarah Miss Sarah, and Sarah had started buying specialized organic snacks that Lily liked, though she pretended the assistant bought them. Ethan, however, was going stir-crazy. He wasn't used to being a kept man. He had fixed everything in the apartment that could be fixed. He had organized the library. Now he was bored. One Tuesday, he walked into Sarah's home office to drop off some mail. She wasn't there, but her desk was covered in large A1 blueprints for the Sterling Spire, the flagship project that was supposed to revitalize the company's image. Ethan glanced at them. Then he looked closer. He frowned. He grabbed a red pencil from the cup. He was so engrossed he didn't hear Sarah come in. "What are you doing?" Ethan jumped. Sarah stood in the doorway, looking furious. "Are you drawing on my master plans?" "Sarah, who drafted the HVAC schematics for the upper atrium?" Ethan asked, ignoring her anger. "The lead engineer. Why?" "Because he's an idiot," Ethan said, tapping the paper. "Look, the intake vents are positioned too close to the exhaust for the generator room. If the wind hits from the north, which it does in Chicago 80% of the winter, you're going to be sucking carbon monoxide right back into the executive suites. You'll poison your tenants." Sarah walked over. She leaned over his shoulder, smelling of jasmine and rain. She studied the lines where Ethan had made red slashes. She traced the path with her finger. She stopped. She paled. "My God," she whispered, "how did they miss this?" They were trying to save space to maximize the square footage of the corner office, Ethan said. "Greed over geometry." Sarah looked at him. "Fix it." "What?" "Redraw it. Right now. I have a board meeting with the investors in 3 hours. Conrad is trying to get the project cancelled, claiming it's structurally unsound. If I show them this floor is fixed, I save the project." Ethan smiled. He rolled up his sleeves. "Get me a scale ruler and some coffee." The board meeting was a bloodbath, but Sarah survived. She came home that evening looking exhilarated. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes bright. "They loved it," she said, throwing her coat on the couch, something she never did. "Conrad tried to argue about the ventilation, and I slapped your new schematics on the table. He shut up immediately." She walked over to where Ethan was sitting on the floor, building a Lego castle with Lily. "Thank you," she said. She looked at him with a new intensity. It wasn't just gratitude, it was attraction. Power was the only language Sarah spoke fluently, and Ethan had just shown he could speak it too. "Just doing my job, Mum," Ethan teased. "Don't call me Mum," she said. "It makes me feel old." "You're not old," Lily piped up. "You're just grown up." Sarah smiled at Lily, a genuine, soft smile that transformed her face. Ethan felt his heart do a traitorous flip in his chest. "Careful," he told himself. "It's a contract. Don't fall for the boss." But the universe had other plans. 2 days later, the real attack came. Ethan was picking Lily up from school when his phone blew up. Text messages from Mark, from his old co-workers, from numbers he didn't know. "Check the news." "Dude, is this true? They're saying you stole money." Ethan opened a news app, the top story on the Chicago Chronicle's gossip page. "Sterling husband's dark secret, embezzlement and gambling debts." The article claimed that Ethan had been fired from his old firm not for layoffs, but for stealing company funds to pay off gambling debts. It cited an anonymous source close to the family. Conrad. Ethan felt like he couldn't breathe. It was a lie, a total fabrication. But in Sarah's world, perception was reality. He rushed back to the penthouse. Sarah was already there, pacing the living room. Janice and 3 lawyers were sitting on the couches. When Ethan walked in, the room went silent. "It's a lie," Ethan said, his voice shaking. "Sarah, I swear, I never stole a dime. The debts were medical bills for Meredith. You know that." Sarah stood by the window, her back to him. She turned slowly. Her face was unreadable. "I know," she said. Ethan blinked. "You do?" "I ran a full background check on you the night we met, Ethan. Down to your library fines," Sarah said calmly. "I know exactly why you were in debt. I know you're honest to a fault." She walked over to him, her heels clicking on the floor. She stopped inches from him. She reached up and fixed his collar, which was askew. "Conrad thinks he can shame me by shaming you," she said, her voice cold as steel. "He thinks I'll panic and annul the marriage to save face. He doesn't know who he's dealing with." She turned to the lawyers. "Issue a statement. We are suing the Chronicle for libel, and release the medical records. Redacted, of course. We're going to spin this. Ethan isn't a gambler. He's a tragic widower who sacrificed everything for his dying wife. He's a hero." Janice nodded furiously, typing on her phone. "The hero husband angle. I love it. The public will eat it up." Ethan stared at Sarah. She was manipulating his tragedy, using his pain as a PR weapon. He should have been angry. But he saw her hand trembling slightly at her side. She was protecting him the only way she knew how, with aggression. "Thank you," Ethan said quietly. "Don't thank me," Sarah said, her eyes meeting his. "We're partners. Anyone who comes for you, comes for me, and I destroy anyone who comes for me." The hero husband narrative worked. The public sympathy swung violently in Ethan's favor. Conrad went silent, retreating into the shadows, but the stress took its toll. In mid-March, a flu swept through Chicago. Sarah, who believed her immune system was too efficient to get sick, collapsed during a conference call. Ethan found her on the bathroom floor, shivering violently, clutching a towel. "I'm fine," she chattered, her teeth clicking. "Just need water." "You have a fever of 103, Ethan said, touching her forehead. "You're not fine. You're human. Come on." He carried her to bed. For the next 3 days, the terrifying CEO was reduced to a whimpering mess of blankets and tissues. Ethan took over. He cancelled her meetings, which involved hacking her phone password. It was Sterling 1. He made soup. He applied cool compresses to her head. On the second night, the fever broke. Sarah woke up in the middle of the night. The room was dim, lit only by a street lamp outside. Ethan was asleep in the armchair next to the bed, a book resting on his chest. Sarah watched him. She felt weak, stripped of all her defenses. She looked at this man who had come into her life as a transaction and had somehow become her anchor. "Ethan," she rasped. He woke up instantly. "Hey, you okay? Water?" He poured a glass and held it to her lips. She drank greedily. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, her voice rasped. "The contract doesn't cover nursing duty." "It's what you do for family," Ethan said simply. "We're not family," Sarah whispered. "We're a merger." "Maybe we started that way," Ethan said. He brushed a strand of damp hair off her forehead. His touch was gentle, reverent. "But you're not just a merger to me, Sarah. Not anymore." Sarah's breath hitched. She looked at him, really looked at him. The kindness in his eyes was terrifying. It demanded something from her she wasn't sure she could give. "Everyone leaves," she said, a tear slipping out. "My mother left. My father, he didn't leave, but he wasn't there. He looked at me and saw a successor, not a daughter. You'll leave too, once you get the money, once the year is up." "I'm not going anywhere," Ethan said. He leaned in. It wasn't a planned move. It was magnetic. Sarah didn't pull away. She leaned up. Their lips met. It wasn't like the wedding kiss. It was desperate, feverish, and real. It tasted of soup and longing. Ethan's hand cupped her face, his thumb stroking her cheek. Sarah's fingers tangled in his shirt, pulling him closer. For a moment, the contract didn't exist. The money didn't exist. Then a door creaked. "Mummy!" They broke apart instantly. Lily was standing in the doorway, rubbing her eyes. She looked at Sarah. "Mummy, I had a bad dream." Silence slammed into the room. Lily had never called her mummy before. She had called her Miss Sarah. Sarah froze. The word seemed to hit her like a physical blow. She looked at the child, then at Ethan. The panic returned, sharper than before. She saw the trap closing. If she loved this child, if she loved this man, she would have something to lose. And Sarah Sterling could not afford to lose. "I need to sleep," Sarah said, turning away from them, pulling the covers up. Her voice was cold again. "Ethan, take her back to bed, please." Ethan looked at Sarah's turned back. He felt the rejection sting, deeper this time, because he had let his guard down. "Come on, Lil," he said softly. He picked up his daughter and walked out, closing the door on the woman who was slowly breaking his heart. While Ethan dealt with the emotional fallout in the penthouse, Conrad was busy in a smoky bar on the south side. He sat across from a young man with a nervous tic, the waiter from Le Monarque. "You're sure?" Conrad asked, sliding an envelope thick with cash across the table. "I'm sure," the waiter said, checking the envelope. "Christmas Eve. They came in separate. She treated him like dirt, called him a Honda Civic. Said she needed a husband for the trust fund. He looked desperate. Then they left together in her car." Conrad smiled. It was a shark's smile. "Perfect," Conrad whispered. "She didn't just marry a stranger. She coerced a desperate man into a fraudulent contract. The board will love this." He pulled out his phone, "and I think I know just when to reveal it." The weeks following the mummy incident were defined by a silence so loud it practically rang in Ethan's ears. Sarah Sterling had rebuilt her walls, brick by brick, reinforcing them with steel and razor wire. She stopped coming home for dinner. She slept in the guest suite. She spoke to Ethan only through her assistant, Janice. Ethan tried to bridge the gap. He left notes, he sent texts. He tried to corner her in the kitchen to talk about the kiss, about the palpable electricity that was still humming between them. But Sarah was a master of evasion. She was terrified, not of losing the company, but of losing control. Then came May, Lily's 6th birthday. Sarah, perhaps out of guilt, had insisted on throwing the party to end all parties. She rented out the rooftop garden of the Sterling Tower. There was a petting zoo, a magician flown in from Las Vegas, and a cake the size of a Fiat. It was a beautiful day. The sun was shining, reflecting off the glass skyscrapers. Lily was wearing a dress that looked like spun sugar, running around with a dozen classmates. Ethan stood by the buffet table, watching his daughter laugh. He felt a heavy ache in his chest. In 7 months, the contract would expire. They would pack up, they would leave, and Lily would lose the only mother figure she had known since Meredith died. "You look like you're at a funeral," Sarah's voice came from beside him. Ethan turned. Sarah was wearing a floral sundress, a rare departure from her power suits. She looked softer, but her eyes were guarded behind oversized sunglasses. "Just thinking about time," Ethan said. "She's growing up fast." "She's happy," Sarah said, watching Lily. "That's what matters." "Sarah, we need to talk." Ethan lowered his voice. "About us. About what happened when you were sick." Sarah stiffened. "Nothing happened, Ethan. I had a fever. I was delirious." "You weren't delirious when you kissed me," Ethan said, stepping closer. "And you aren't delirious now. Stop hiding behind the contract." Sarah took a breath, her composure cracking. "Ethan, you don't understand. My life isn't a fairy tale. It's a battlefield. If I let you in, if I really let you in, you'll just be collateral damage. I can take care of well, isn't this a touching domestic scene?" The voice cut through the air like a serrated knife. Ethan and Sarah turned. The music seemed to stop. The chatter of the parents died down. Conrad Sterling was striding across the rooftop garden. He wasn't alone. He was flanked by 2 men in dark suits and a woman with a severe haircut holding a briefcase. "Conrad," Sarah said, her voice dropping to 0 degrees. "This is a private party. Get out." "Oh, I'm not staying for the cake, cousin," Conrad smiled. It was a predator's smile. "I'm just here to deliver a gift." He gestured to the woman with the briefcase. She stepped forward and handed Sarah a thick folder. "What is this?" Sarah asked, not taking it. "It's a subpoena," Conrad announced, loud enough for the nearby parents to hear. "And a notification of an emergency board meeting scheduled for tomorrow morning. The agenda? The removal of the CEO on the grounds of fraud and moral turpitude. Ethan stepped in front of Sarah. You're bluffing, Conrad. You have nothing. Do I? Conrad pulled a tablet from his jacket. He tapped the screen and held it up. It was a video, grainy, shaky, clearly taken on a cell phone. It showed the interior of Le Monarque on Christmas Eve. On the screen, Sarah was shouting, I need a husband, now. I'll pay you $500,000. Ethan's blood turned to ice. The waiter had recorded them. Conrad paused the video. Solicitation. Conspiracy to commit fraud against the estate. It's all there. The contract isn't a marriage, Sarah. It's a business transaction designed to defraud our grandfather's will. He looked at Ethan. And you're an accomplice. Once the police see this, you won't just be broke. You'll be in prison. And I wonder, what happens to little Lily when her daddy is in a cell? Ethan lunged. You leave her out of this! Sarah grabbed Ethan's arm, holding him back with surprising strength. Her face was pale, stripped of all color. She looked at the tablet, then at Conrad, then at Lily, who was happily petting a goat, oblivious to the destruction of her world. Sarah calculated. She always calculated. She saw the checkmate. If they fought this, the video would leak. The press would destroy them. Ethan would be dragged through the mud. Child Protective Services might get involved. She made a choice, the hardest choice of her life. She looked at Ethan. Her eyes were no longer cold. They were filled with a devastating, tragic apology. Ethan, she said, her voice trembling. We can fight this, Ethan whispered urgently. We'll tell the truth. We fell in love. It became real. No, Sarah said loud enough for Conrad to hear. She stepped back, breaking his hold. No, Ethan. It never became real. Ethan froze. What? Sarah put her mask back on. It was a perfect porcelain mask of indifference. Conrad is right, she said coldly, turning to face her cousin. It was a business arrangement, a lapse in judgment. I was desperate to save the company, and I hired a desperate man. She turned to Ethan. You're fired. The words hung in the air, heavier than the humidity. Sarah. Ethan breathed, shattered. The deal is off, Sarah said, her voice rising, shaking with the effort to keep the act up. Take your daughter and leave, immediately. I will have my lawyers draft a settlement for your silence. But get out of my house. Get out of my life. Conrad looked confused. He had expected them to cling to the lie. He hadn't expected Sarah to cut her own arm off. Sarah, this doesn't save you, Conrad sneered. You still committed fraud. I admitted to a mistake, Sarah snapped at him. I was coerced by the pressure of the will. I'm ending the charade now. You want the company, Conrad. Fight me for it in the boardroom. But this man has nothing to do with it anymore. She turned back to Ethan. Her eyes were screaming. Go, save yourself. Save Lily. But her mouth said, You were a bad investment, Mr. Caldwell. Goodbye. Ethan stood there for a heartbeat that lasted an eternity. He saw what she was doing. She was immolating herself to clear him. She was giving up her defense to ensure he walked away clean. He wanted to scream. He wanted to shake her. But he looked at Lily. He couldn't risk Lily. Ethan swallowed the bile in his throat. He walked over to Lily, picked her up mid-laugh, and walked to the elevator without looking back. As the doors closed, the last thing he saw was Sarah Sterling, standing alone against her enemies, her chin held high, tears finally streaming down her face behind her sunglasses. 7 months of silence had turned Ethan's world into a grey scale. It was Christmas Eve again in Chicago, and the wind howled off Lake Michigan, rattling the familiar rusted radiator in his Rogers Park apartment. Ethan sat on the worn sofa, staring at the Christmas tree. It was smaller than the ones in the Sterling penthouse, but Lily had decorated it with enthusiasm. Now she was asleep, clutching Mr. Hops, dreaming of a Miss Sarah who wasn't coming back. Ethan was miserable. He had a job at a mid-sized firm, rebuilding his reputation, but the silence in his life was deafening. He hadn't touched a cent of the settlement money Sarah had sent. It sat in an escrow account, a painful reminder of the transaction that had broken his heart. He clicked on the TV to drown out the quiet. The news was on. Breaking news. Sterling Media CEO Sarah Sterling has announced a shocking move tonight. Ethan sat up, his heart hammering against his ribs. In a press conference held moments ago, Miss Sterling announced she is dissolving the family trust and donating the majority of her controlling shares to a non-profit foundation. This move effectively prevents a hostile takeover by her cousin, Conrad Sterling, but it also leaves Sarah Sterling with zero equity in the company. She is walking away with nothing but her freedom. The screen cut to a clip of Sarah leaving the Sterling Tower. She looked thinner, tired, but she was smiling. A real, unburdened smile. "I realized," Sarah said to the cameras, her voice clear, "that I was fighting for a legacy that didn't love me back. I built a tower of ice, and I forgot that people can't live in ice." Ethan stared at the screen. She had done it. She had burned down her empire to save herself, and maybe to save the possibility of something else. He looked at the clock. 9 p.m., the exact time they had met 1 year ago. "Mrs. Higgins," Ethan yelled, grabbing his coat. "I need you. Emergency." The snow was falling just as hard as it had the year before. The street outside Le Monarque was empty, save for the swirling white flakes. Sarah Sterling stood on the corner, wearing the same red coat she had worn that fateful night. She held a cheap cup of gas station coffee, shivering slightly. She didn't know why she had come here, perhaps to say goodbye to the person she used to be. "You're going to freeze out here." Sarah spun around. Ethan was standing a few feet away, breathing hard, snow dusting his hair. "Ethan," she whispered, the steam from her breath vanishing in the wind. "I saw the news," he said, stepping closer. "You gave it all away." "I didn't want it anymore," she said, her voice trembling. "It cost too much. It cost me. Us. What are you going to do now?" "I don't know," she admitted, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I have a law degree and a lot of bad press. I'm not a Ferrari anymore, Ethan. I'm just a broken-down luxury sedan with no gas." "Good," Ethan smiled, the warmth returning to his eyes. "Because I'm still a Honda Civic, and I've got plenty of gas." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, the settlement check she had sent him months ago. Sarah's eyes widened. "Ethan, you need that, for Lily." Ethan ripped the check in half, then he ripped it again, letting the pieces flutter down into the slush like expensive confetti. "I don't want your money," he said firmly. "I never did. I want the partner. I want the woman who crawled under a sofa to find a stuffed rabbit. I want the woman who fought for me." He closed the distance between them, taking her cold hands in his warm ones. "Sarah Sterling," he said, "last year you asked me a question in a limo. It was a business deal. Tonight I'm asking you for real. No contracts, no expiration date." He dropped to one knee in the snow. Sarah gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. "Will you be my wife?" Ethan asked. "Will you be my family?" Sarah fell to her knees beside him, disregarding the cold, throwing her arms around his neck. "Yes," she sobbed into his shoulder. "Yes, yes, yes." Ethan kissed her, and it tasted of snowflakes and second chances. It was the only warmth they would ever need. "Come on," Ethan said, pulling her up and wiping the tears from her face. "Let's go home. Lily is waiting." Sarah hooked her arm through his, squeezing tight. They turned their backs on the towering skyscrapers and the empty life of wealth, walking together into the snow, headed toward a small, drafty apartment that was finally, truly, going to be a home. Love often appears in the most unexpected packages. For Ethan and Sarah, it began as a transaction, a desperate bid for survival. But what started with a contract ended with a sacrifice. Sarah learned that true power isn't about controlling an empire, but about having the courage to let it go for the people you love. In the end, they found that the richest treasure wasn't the sterling trust fund, but the messy, imperfect, beautiful life they built together. Wow, what a journey! From a cold rejection to a heartwarming proposal in the snow. If Ethan and Sarah's story touched your heart, please give this video a like. It really helps the channel. And tell me in the comments, do you think Sarah made the right choice giving up her fortune for love? I want to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching.